Okay, Council, good evening, and welcome to the second half of our Council meeting at 6:30. I'm just going to check in with Council. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda that remains for this evening? Seeing none, the first up is delegations, and we're welcoming All Saints Anglican Church, Reverend Marty Levesque. You're the priest in charge, so please welcome.
Families as part of our delegation.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask you to turn on your microphone if you don't mind, just so that it can be heard better on the recording. Thank you.
Perfect, no problem. When we decided to redevelop our property at 400 Northfield Drive West, we wanted to make sure that the building we built would serve the neighborhood. And through numerous community consultations with the residents of Lakeshore North and South, engagement with fellow not-for-profit partners, we learned the greatest need for Ward 3 and for Lakeshore neighborhoods was a community center for various community-based activities. The reason being is, historically, the City of Waterloo simply does not build or maintain any community-based community centers in the city. The city builds large facilities primarily for hockey and swimming, like at the Rec Center or Albert McCormick, but they don't build, maintain, or staff any community centers in neighborhoods. This has been left up to other organizations such as Camino at the Karen Chair House on Amos Street and the House of Friendship at the Sunnydale Community Center. It should be noted that both these community centers are in corner townhome units of about approximately 1,000 square feet. The new church built at 400 Northfield Drive West with its community center is 17,000 square feet, of which over 10,000 square feet is dedicated community center space. And it features a rec gym, a community industrial kitchen, classrooms, party room, rental room, music room, and youth gathering space, as well as room for after-school homework clubs and the like. The results of the historical decisions of the City of Waterloo to not invest in community centers has led to other organizations filling this need and building and maintaining their own neighborhood community spaces, and this has created a class-based system. Simply put, if you have money like the Beechwood Neighborhood Associations, you build your own pools, tennis courts, community rooms, and spaces, and they are gated. So we decided we would build a community center with our new church that would serve over 10,000 residents a year and would be open to everybody. And unlike the Karen Chair House operated by Camino or the Sunnydale Community Center operated by the House of Friendship, this new space would offer facilities and infrastructure that does not exist otherwise in Waterloo and has been requested and in high demand from our not-for-profit partners. Furthermore, to the need for this center, according to the Region of Waterloo Public Health, the Lakeshore Columbia neighborhood is in the highest category for proportion of visible minorities by neighborhood. The highest category for proportion of population that is low income are families without disposable income by neighborhood, and is in the lowest category of proportion of families experiencing social cohesion by neighborhood. The creation of the Sidewalk Center, that's the name we're playing with right now, also aligns with the urban policy objectives as outlined in the City of Waterloo's Park Master Plan and the Recreation and Leisure Service Master Plans, both of which identify the important role that community groups and not-for-profits play in recreation provisions for the community and underscores the improved community outcomes when neighborhood-based community groups and not-for-profits take an active leadership role in service delivery. So we're here tonight to ask Council for a modest grant of $120,000 from the Council's Community Priority and Contingency Reserve. And this represents 1.6% of our total overall budget of $7 million. We have spoken with staff and the corporate management team does not recommend providing funding, and they gave us 4 reasons, and I'd like to address each one of those individually. Number 1, they said places of worship are already exempt from property taxes. This is true. Places of worship and faith communities and people of faith, meanwhile, provide over 70% of all social services delivered to ratepayers and citizens of Waterloo. We would be happy to pay property taxes if you would assume that responsibility. Second, furthermore, the project has also opened up 70 new housing units and ratepayers from a historic property that did not contribute to the tax base. So that's a win for you. Couple this with the housing project, approximately $2.5 million in development charges. There's a strong economic case for the grant request. Second reason we were given is the city has no history of funding capital projects for churches. Doing so could set a policy precedent. To which I say good. If another place of worship were to come to you and offer to build a community center for one of your wards, I would say you should support that and fund that community center. And let's keep breaking this class-based system that has been passed on to us and continue to have our decisions align with the urban policy objectives as outlined in the Waterloo Parks Master Plan and the Recreation and Leisure Service Master Plans. Third reason we were given is there's no budget allocation to make such a contribution to us. The only viable source of funding would be Council's Community Priority and Contingency Reserve, which says to me that there is actually a source for this contribution and would be up to you, Council. Fourth reason we were given is the city's own research has demonstrated that many equity-deserving groups are unwilling to use spaces within places of worship and rather seeking other affordable options. I have no reason to dispute that research, but I would suggest that this portion of the population is probably around 10 to 15%, and currently 100% of the population has no other affordable option because no other community centers exist. In closing, I'd like to draw Council's attention to the numerous letters of support that was in your package from our partner organizations that will be assisting us, making use of the space themselves to deliver programs to the residents of Lakeshore North and South. Our partners include Lutherwood's Children's Mental Health Center, Camino, Adventure for Change, Afro, the Regional Waterloo Food Bank, Lakeshore North Neighborhood Association, which makes All Saints its home, Lakeshore South Neighborhood Association, Boy Scouts of Canada, Girl Guides of Canada, House of Friendship. And we are always open and happy to welcome others into the community center space, into what will become a neighborhood hub, a hub that provides positive upstream effects to families of all age categories in mental, physical, and emotional health. And to quote a personal hero of mine, and someone I had the pleasure recently to see at Center in the Square, Bill Nye the Science Guy, let's change the world. Or in this case, let's change Waterloo. Thank you, and I would like to pass it over to Jane Mitchell, President of Lakeshore South Community Association, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have afterwards.
Good afternoon, Mayor McCabe and councillors. He just introduced me, so I'll just add that I have lived in Lakeshore Waterloo for over 40 years. Over the years, Waterloo has had a centralized model of services versus a community model. People must travel by car or transit to get to Rim Park or the Waterloo Memorial Recreation Complex or a couple of the others that you have. They have pools or gyms or community rooms, all at a price. All programs have a cost, and for an average family, it is not cheap. They can humble themselves and put their poverty on display to get a lesser rate. Community associations must also pay, even though at a half rate, to rent a room. They can get one event rate free per year. In Kitchener, community associations can rent a room for free. This frees up money that can be put into events and programs. A number of community centers in Waterloo, like those in Beechwood and at the Columbia Lake townhouses, are for members only. Everyone else is shut out. Over the years, Albert McCormick and Lakeshore only had a poorly planned room to rent and very little community programming. I am glad that renovations are now going on and that youth can sign up for a new program for $10 for 6 weeks. It's a great step forward, and it's also great that we now have a splash pad and the skateboarding. If Waterloo wants to embrace the 15-minute city where people can bike or walk to amenities or even embrace the idea of community neighborhoods, the centralized model of services must change. Lakeshore North does not have a community center. Neither does Clare Hills, Eastbridge, Lexington, and Westvale. Laurelwood has to pay for programming at the YMCA, and their community association also feels part of their neighborhood is too far away. The city centralized senior programs at the Community Pavilion. I have been there. It is fantastic. But many seniors must use transit to go there if they do not live uptown or drive. They need community centers where they can play cards or participate in programming. Youth especially need a place where they can go in their neighborhood, not to be driven everywhere by their parents. Young mothers need a drop-in like breastfeeding buddies in walkable distance. New immigrants need a space where they can cook and learn English. Sunnydale and the Herb Keats Way community centers, which are run by House of Friendship in Camilo, are small and mostly cater to the residents of the surrounding social housing. Regional family outreach workers and the new upstream programs are normally tied to a community center. I was once told when I asked that everyone in Waterloo can afford to pay and play. This is not true. In any case, in other cities, even the rich areas like Forest Heights have community centers open to all. New suburbs like Williamsburg have community centers. I know that this new council has new priorities. You are concerned about the environment and community. You can't build density and not have the amenities that people need. So please support the Lakeshore North Sidewalk Center. And by the way, it is totally non-denominational. All the religious part is in the church, and the community center is totally non-denominational. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'll just look around the table, see if there's any questions. Sorry, I should check first. Were you done your presentation? I didn't want to be disrespectful.
No.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Roach.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Pastor Marty and Jane Mitchell. I think what you're doing is incredible. And, actually recently I got some concerns sent to me that, that the community center shouldn't be connected to a church. And we don't really have those concerns. You had mentioned point number 4 of why we couldn't have a community center. And, we don't really seem to have problems when we ask those people to vote in churches, or the region of Waterloo actually has a food distribution at your church. That doesn't seem to be an issue. In fact, I was at the food distribution on Wednesday at All Saints, and forget, council, what you think you know about food distribution. This is not your everyday food distribution. These are moms in minivans coming after work, getting food for tonight's dinner. So that was quite incredible, and it was a huge eye-opener to me. We've all been to other food distribution places before, but I really thank you for what you're doing. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how Jane finished up on inclusivity, and what is the church's position on inclusion and diversity strategies?
So what we did through the chair, Councillor, what we did in the very design of the building, we wanted to separate secular and sacred. So the exterior of the building is running in 2 different colors. Secular space, the community center space, is one brick color. Sacred space is a different brick color. It is hived off, and that way the community center wraps around. So it visually will tell that story. The entryway has our reconciliation walkway, which is a walkway that is painted orange with white feathers, and there will be a reconciliation garden right out in the front. This is part of, we take very seriously the calls to action from the TRC. Especially the calls to action surrounding the churches and faith communities. We want to make sure that what we're building it always takes reconciliation at heart. And we consulted with 6 Nations on that, and with Anishinaabe Outreach. Also, in the building itself, all the washrooms are gender neutral. There are no gendered washrooms. No one has to identify when they come into the building, and that makes it a safer and more inclusive space. Couple that with our north sidewalk, that is a pride walkway. Will be painted with the pride flag, as well as we're also home to 2 other congregations. One is a Filipino congregation underneath All Saints, and we give that diaspora community a home, as well as we have Four Square, which is a Nigerian-based church. We take inclusivity, I don't want to get theological because you probably don't want to hear a sermon, but it is part of our baptismal covenant. It's what every Christian needs to do, is to respect the dignity of each and every human being, regardless of whether they're Christian or not. And it's something we take to heart at All Saints, and it's something that we live, and we've invested into our building to make sure that building will tell that story.
Right. Thank you. You spoke a little bit about the economic impact, with regard to the development fees that weren't being received, or the taxes that will not be received weren't received in the past. Can you build any further on the economic impact with regard to the community? You know, rental space. Jane talked about paying for playing. You know, talk to me a little bit about the economic impact.
So a couple of things that I would say is I'm a member of the Lakeshore North Neighborhood Association. I sit on the executive. I'm their treasurer as well. We used to meet at the Albert McCormick Rec Center, and the entire City of Waterloo operational grant for the Lakeshore North Neighborhood Association used to go to pay rent. It would just all be clawed back by the city. And so by bringing the neighborhood association over to All Saints, we were able to free up that grant. Now that grant actually goes into programs into the neighborhood. Before, it just came right back to the city of Waterloo. So that's one area. The other area is All Saints has historically now, for the past number of years, created over $30,000 a year in economic output into the neighborhood, either through free room rentals, in straight cash donations, support of neighborhood associations, both Lakeshore and South, as well as food distribution and such. We anticipate that economic impact in the neighborhood rising from $30,000 a year to $75,000 to $100,000 a year in the new community center space. So a modest grant of $120,000, we feel, we'll be able to pay back to the city of Waterloo in 2 short years, and we'll be able to continue to do that year after year after year. So we do have a significant impact in the neighborhood economically.
Great. And I'm going to pass off to a couple other my council friends here, but I just wanted, I know it was in our information package, but I just wanted to put it into the record. I just want to read a little quote here. As humans, we have both a desire and a need to gather. People are more attracted to spaces that are nearby and in their neighborhood. While there are plenty of outdoor spaces available in city parks and Laurel Creek Conservation Area, indoor community space is not near. Programs in community space will invigorate and help the community. Dave Jaworski. So I'll pass off.
Thank you. Other questions, Council? Councillor Vasek.
Thanks for coming to Council to present, both of you. My question is about your comment about there being a non-denominational space and then a sacred space, I think you called it. Can you tell me a bit more about the non-denominational space? Who's going to run programming? Who kind of manages that?
The secular space, the community center space, will be run by, have with us here Pastor Dan. Pastor Dan is in charge of what we call outreach ministries, but is really what you would call community development, just to translate language. Dan is a registered social worker with the Ontario College, and he will be in charge of the delivery of the program. So one of the things we're making sure is that all the sacred stuff exists within the church proper. Everything outside and the rest of the space is meant to be secular because we want it to be open and welcoming to all. And I know Jane said non-denominational. I'm just going to correct that record a little bit. No faith at all. It doesn't. It's when non-denominational just sort of implies to me Christian, and I want to make sure it's clear that Muslim, Jew, Christian, Hindu doesn't matter.
It's very hard for me to now ask a follow-up question that feels like a little bit of a challenging question because you're a priest. So I'm having a hard time totally wrapping my head around it being a completely non-faith-based space. And I'm sure you're a great priest and a great social worker, so not questioning that in any way. Just how do you kind of reconcile it being a non-faith space with having the main community outreach worker be also a priest?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, like anybody who's a Christian, when they go into a voting booth, goes in as a Christian, and they vote based upon their conscience anyways. I don't think whether Dan's a priest or not should matter in that sense. But one of the things we are conscious of making sure that we do is the church as an institution is really good at giving birth to things. So we gave birth to Monica Place, to St. John's Soup Kitchen, to House of Friendship, Ray of Hope, right? All these places came out of the church. Will Sidewalk Center always be part of All Saints? I don't know. My hope and goal is, as the organization grows, our community council, which we're pulling from Lakeshore South and Lakeshore North, and our youth council, we're pulling from the neighborhood kids. They're going to be guiding the direction of the community center. So it's not that we are doing it. The neighborhood's going to tell us what they want to do, and then we're going to do it, and we're going to actualize it. And as the years progress, the separation out of these two into like that sort of beautiful public-private partnership, you know, the idea of like these two things coexisting together at the same time, but being separate. And we hope that the community center will actually one day become its own not-for-profit entity.
Okay, thanks for that. And then just, I have one question of staff after, but how'd you come to the name Sidewalk Center?
Because secular and sacred walk together in this world. And together we can change the world. But only if we're willing to walk together.
Thank you.
Other questions, Council? Councillor Broadley.
I might have a question for staff, but thank you, Pastor Levesque. Setting aside the secular sacred piece today, or in the future, excuse me. Today, if I heard you correctly, the Lakeshore North Neighborhood Association meets at the church, or was meeting at the church previously. There's no discussion about whether that's a secular or a sacred space. It's clearly the church today. Do you feel like, and notwithstanding the whole conversation around the finances and Albert McCormick, et cetera, that's a separate piece for me. But do you feel like there are folks in Lakeshore North who felt uncomfortable becoming part of the neighborhood association because that's where you met? And how did the neighborhood association sort of try to overcome that obstacle, I guess?
Speaking as a member of the neighborhood association, no, we never felt that we had a problem with people joining the neighborhood association or any of the activities of the neighborhood association that took place at the center. No one's ever brought it up to the neighborhood association or made any comment to myself or any other member of the association. You know, like churches have for centuries, you know, provided space for all kinds of community meetings, town hall meetings. I mean, we hosted the Ward 3 debate for the past couple of municipal elections. And nobody has ever felt that they couldn't come into the space and ask a question or such, or be a part of a program that is active in that space.
Any other questions, Council? I had a question, but sorry, you go ahead. Oh, for staff, I have a question. So you just made the comment that churches have served a role as community centers for many years. Mm-hmm. I agree with that statement. And I'm a covenant member of Mennonite Brethren Church, WMB, and Christ Lutheran is across the street in my ward. And they do serve critical roles in terms of community centers. How can you help me to come up with an answer to them around funding? Like they've never asked for funding, and we have funding streams. We have applications, grant applications. Did you apply for those?
The City of Waterloo doesn't have doesn't have funding applications for what we're doing. We did research and look into it. The region does, and we're in the process of working through that in their upstream program. The facilities that we're building and the infrastructure that we're putting into place simply doesn't exist otherwise in Lakeshore North. Right? There's no community kitchens. There are no rec gyms. There's no place for people to gather. Each and every Friday and Saturday night, if you watch the Lakeshore North neighborhood page on Facebook, you will just hear story again of neighborhood kids out being kids, right? And teenagers being teenagers. And, you know, the fact that we're able to build something that we're able to bring these kids in and have open gym nights each and every Friday night, give them a safe place to be, and we can help build these youth up and teach them leadership skills as they come onto youth councils and they tell us what they want. If they want youth dances, we'll put on youth dances. If they want, you know, whatever they want, we will do. The reason why I think this is a bit different than some of the other churches, what other churches do, is other churches act as churches. And they act as churches very specifically in the sense of like, we're a church, we'll rent space, or we'll do those type of things, right? We'll try to assist in the neighborhood. We are intentionally trying to build a community center. That is a community center. That is not just a community space within a church. We're trying to build a community center. Something that will, as I said, one day, hopefully, cleave off into its own entity. Because it doesn't exist otherwise.
Thank you. Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Councillor Freeman, and thank you again, both Jane and Father Levesque for coming in. Just a couple of questions to help me understand this a bit more. So when your property was developed, my understanding is there's a development charge credit for churches. I mean, I don't know, Ron may need to correct me, but were you able to apply for that development charge credit?
The demolition credit went to the developer who purchased the property.
Okay. Am
So-
I calling it the right thing, Ron?
There is,
I just want to check that I'm actually referring to the right.
Yeah, through Councillor Freeman to you, Mayor. There are credits potentially for development charges, although the municipality has to pay them back, is my understanding. I don't know if Ms. Reynolds would like to comment. She probably knows the Development Charges Act better than I do in terms of the financials, but the city would have to pay that DC credit back if there were to ever be one.
So then the demolition credit went to the developer, not to the church?
correct, went to the developer because because the piece of the property that we severed and sold to create, to be able to fund this new development had the existing church on it. So the developer bought the existing church and he gets Cook Homes gets the demolition credit.
Okay. Is that the way, I don't know if we've done very many of these projects or had many of these projects in Waterloo, but is that sort of traditionally the way it would happen? That the developer gets that rather than the church that's rebuilding or sold the property?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to the mayor. So this isn't specific. The demolition credit is not specific to a place of worship or a church. It's simply for an existing structure that is being demolished, and that credit is part of the act requirements to provide to whoever is demolishing that property. And in this case, the developer purchased that piece of the property where the existing church resides that will be demolished. So that credit is for the owner of the property, which in this case is now the developer.
Okay. Well, I hope they made a donation to your rebuilding project, but
They did give us a fair price.
yeah, okay. And my other question is, because you're saying that you're going to run programs and services and out of at no cost. And so I'm just wondering how, what's the model, the sustainable part of the model? Like, how are you, assuming, sorry, I missed your name, the other pastor, he's going to be paid to do this. So I'm just wondering, how does that model work?
It depends on the program that we're going to be running. So open gym nights every Friday night for youth will be open and free. Other programs and other offerings to the neighborhood, there may be a charge for. For instance, there's for-profit businesses like Music Together. It's a wonderful program, operates at Christ Lutheran Church. I take my kids there every Wednesday. They're looking for space in Lakeshore North. They're a for-profit company, we will charge them rent. There's also I don't know how else to say it, but like there's the business side of the church where weddings are, very lucrative for the church, right? So there's that. We also have a very good donor base as well, and we will continue to monetize the property in ways that makes sense for room rentals are long-term rentals for other organizations and such. So it just all depends. We have a slide and scale model that we're working on, that if you're a not-for-profit and you're offering a service for free, such as the Regional Waterloo Food Bank, we open up our kitchen, it's free, we don't charge, right? If you are a not-for-profit that are offering a service that has a user fee, then there is a small rent. And then if you're a for-profit business or a private entity looking to rent space, and then there's the regular room charge, the regular rate.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And just one other question I had was, you had referenced that faith-based organizations provide 70% of all the services in Waterloo. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just wondering where that statistic comes from, because I know the city also operates an awful lot of programs. So just wondering if you could provide a bit more background to that 70%, because it does seem really high. And I just also wanted to maybe check in with staff around that number too.
Yeah, that number came from research that I was blessed to do with Glenn Pearson back in London. He's the head of the London Food Bank, former member of Parliament, and we looked at the major cities all throughout southwestern Ontario when doing that research, and we found that it is like you look at most of the meal programs in a city. Or even the shelter offerings in cities. Most of them are operated by faith-based organizations, or organizations that came out of faith-based. So, like in London, Mission Services of London, or here House of Friendship, Ray of Hope. Excuse me. They all came out of these faith-based organizations that have led the charge on this and provide most of the social service delivery. Yeah. No. Sorry, no. I meant social services delivery. So, like and when sorry, I should have been more clear. Like things like meal programs or shelters or emergency responses, all those type of things.
Is there any other questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you very much. And now I know there's some questions for staff. So I'm going to come back to Councillor Vasek. I believe that Councillor Rowe had a question for staff as well. So I'll start with Councillor Vasek.
Thanks, through you, Chair. Probably for Commissioner Dijkstra. And what I'm curious about is the centralized model of community centers in Waterloo as compared to that more community-based model. So what have we done to date to make more of a community model? Do we have plans to broaden and expand that? Or are we still looking primarily at a centralized model?
Through the chair to Councillor Vasek, I'll initiate and ask Mr. Bowman, who's at the staff desk as well, to add in. So, let me start with, centralized model that does exist, and we've seen the benefits of that. We do know there's gaps in areas across the city, and that's where our neighborhood strategy has really spoken to that over the years. And where we have implemented that, I'd say in the last term more fully, we've active on that realm in terms of connecting the associations with the city, where we can do that with the community members, create events, fund those events, and really deploy that. We're also looking at our own program delivery and partnering with other organizations to do that, not-for-profits that are providing upstream solutions. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim to see if he has some more examples of the outreach that we're doing and where we see some of the opportunities going forward beyond just the recreation aspects.
Thanks, Mark. Through you, Chair Freeman. The City of Waterloo decided many years ago not to go to the model of community centers that we have in other local jurisdictions for a variety of reasons, of which it was seen as being somewhat more central to have people come into our buildings and we will program accordingly to the needs of the groups. So what Mark says is very true. We currently, with our neighborhood teams, we provide a gathering spaces map that is available to anyone to help spread the word about available space. And if council would like us to follow up on that, we're happy to work with All Saints to have the community members and organizations to have that like an asset map that could be included for any groups that wanted to use space. The city has budget, of course, that we need to follow in terms of the pay for play idea, but we would need to do more gathering information on that particular idea going forward because of the need for low cost program development in the city. I'll stop there for.
Yeah, that's really helpful. The other thing I'm curious about is, could we imagine looking more at a community model? Because not only is it likely to be beneficial in the Lakeshore area, but in other areas. It's actually, funnily enough, one of the reasons I ran, because I worked for Pathways to Education in Kitchener, and they have the community center model, and in townhomes, and I thought, oh wow, that's wonderful, and that could be a model. So that could be replicated in Lakeshore, but also in other areas. And I'm curious if the city might want to review that policy.
We could certainly review that direction going forward. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. Sanjay, I don't wish to put you on the spot, but I was wondering if you could speak to a community center, although not a faith-based on that side, but being connected to a church, and with your experience with the equity deserving groups, sort of what that, does it provide, is it a barrier perhaps, or does it feel accessible? So I'm just curious sort of what your experience is so far talking to those groups.
Through you, Chair, I know some equity deserving groups might be a little anxious, not knowing what the faith aspect of the location looks like, but it might be more of a more intense consultation might be needed to make sure that all groups feel comfortable. I heard the presentation today and really like to look at a little more detail about what kinds of reservations some of those groups might have.
Thank you. Can I do a follow-up question then, if I may? Just to ask then if there has been outreach to the community to see what Sanjay was referring to in terms of how they feel about it being a faith-based connection, but not a faith-based community center.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite following the question.
I'm just, as Sanjay was saying, do more outreach to actually speak to the community members that would be coming, and if there is any resistance to the connection to the faith-based piece, even though it's separate, or if it's not a barrier. I'm just wondering if you've had those conversations.
We've had multiple conversations in the neighborhood with the residents of the neighborhood at many different events at the church and not at the church, and through the neighborhood association, as well as with our fellow not-for-profit partners. And we've connected with very specific partners along the way. So Adventure for Change, which often serves equity-seeking groups, as well as Afro, who are looking for space, specifically because they can't find anywhere else in Waterloo to go. As I said, we consulted heavily on the reconciliation with the Indigenous because it's really close to our hearts. We have a lot of sins that we bear for that. That is a history of colonialism, and especially, I can say, as the Anglican Church, we kind of brought colonialism with us, and so we wanted to make sure that we are including that, and we continue that pathway all the way forward, and make sure that this space is a space that reflects all people and is open to all people, and all people will feel welcomed. Have we spoken to everyone? Probably not. Are we always open to another conversation? Yes. And are we always willing to learn more and how we can better serve our neighbors? Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you.
Since you're at the podium, I have one more question for you. So wasn't this community center and the church design all part of your purchase and sale agreement and vision for this site? Wasn't what you're doing right now your whole vision as part of the sale and the purchase and sale agreement?
Yes.
I'm going to just be honest. I'm really struggling with this ask. There's a real fairness piece here that's not working for me because you sold the property for profit with a goal of building a new church with a community center. And that vision's being realized through the resources of that purchase and sale. And I'm feeling uncomfortable when you've pointed to other communities that have some things that yours doesn't. In my ward, Eastbridge has nothing, and so on. But I don't get that same pressure. Like, they don't feel that they don't have access. I haven't, people. I don't know. And so I'm really struggling with this ask. It's a lot of money you're asking for, and the suggestion that you're substituting social services, that's not our role anyways. That's a regional role. And so I'm just struggling with all of this.
Yeah. So a couple of things. You're right. Social services is a regional role. Community centers is the city's role. And the city doesn't build any. I would be happy to walk out of this room right now if council would agree to build a community center in every community. I understand it's not your model, and I understand that what has happened because of that is we've created a class-based system where some people have access and others do not, and that is very problematic to me, not only as a priest, but as a father and as a citizen and as a ratepayer.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And I think everyone should have access to space for community events, for all the positive upstream effects that come from that. Just a short story, if you don't mind.
I've given you 10 minutes and I didn't ask a question, so I apologize. Okay. The two of us have gotten into a debate, which is unfortunate, and it was offside on my behalf, so I apologize to you for that. I should bring it back to questions, so I'm sorry. The mayor has another question. I believe it's for staff, so thank you for your time.
Yeah, through you, Chair Freeman. I was just wondering, and I don't know if it's to Jim or to Mark, but because Pastor Levesque has talked about the lack of services that are that's in Ward 3, and Councillor Roach has as well, just particularly for some equity deserving groups. I'm just wondering, because we're also putting money into the Albert McCormick Community Centre, and if you could maybe just remind us or maybe share what programs and services are going in there and how that might benefit the community, or how it might change what what services and programs are in Lakeshore.
Yeah, through the chair to the mayor, I can kick that off, and then Jim can add to it. So yes, there is a vision to enhance Albert Community Center. We have some money for environmental improvements with the sustainability aspect of the facility, but also the programming piece. We're looking at our design overview with an ultimate vision that probably goes beyond the current funding and grant, but we're trying to look at just beyond the current spaces to get those revitalized. How does the library fit in? What can they offer more to the community in terms of community access and space? And then the conversation too about better community space, improvements of the current room in that location. Where does a kitchen come into play in offering neighborhood opportunities? Where do some offices for some of the equity groups that are out there, and how can we support them? So there's a number of initiatives that we're trying to look across that the development of that facility to see how we can do a better job going beyond the recreation value that it brings, but community value as well. So Jim, anything else to add? Please.
No, you've covered it, Mark. Chair Freeman. You've covered it. I just want to really emphasize the fact that the library is going through some enhancements and expansion. The library plays a significant role in that community. There's a tremendous comfort level of going to the library on a regular basis. The neighbors, the people who come to that library are very welcomed by the staff. And I had well, maybe not the privilege, but I had the opportunity to work with our regional health team when we did some clinics at the Elton McCormick site this past pandemic. Because they wanted to do a clinic where individuals would be happy to come to, or comfortable to come to, and at the same time was not open to the entire community, because they could go to other sites for the vaccines. It was very well received because there was a comfort level of coming to that building. Now, is it perfect? No, no way. But we're working towards some programming. I think you mentioned it earlier, Mayor McCabe, or maybe it was Jane, the idea of having a try it sports for 6 weeks out there this summer. We're working on that right now. We've had to alter some of our camp programs just because of the difficulty on the site, based on the heat that was being generated in the arena, and the poor little kids were getting exhausted. So we're changing some of the infrastructure to make it more amenable. Camps will be held there, and I was with a staff person today. We're even looking at bringing in other camp opportunities for that site for people who understand, have worked with, and have dealt with some so-called marginalized community members. So there's advancements happening. The renovations have to happen first.
Thank you for that. I don't know the geography probably as well as I should. Is that an area that, like, what would be involved? Like, is that accessible to people from the catchment area that Pastor Levesque had mentioned, 10,000 people that might access the community center they're building? I'm just wondering, like, there's probably a pretty,
I believe it's about
Northfield to cross and that, like, is it actually accessible?
Well, I believe it's about maybe 10 kilometers distance from where All Saints Church is located to Elton McCormick. It's about a 40-minute walk, I would guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, council, is there any other questions? Question of staff? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Roach.
Thank you. And I appreciate the updates to the Albert McCormick community. I've lived in Lakeshore for 51 years, and so I know the area quite well. And that the community center, the kitchen that you can't cook in, the library, reference was made to Eastbridge today, and we're in two different worlds right now. As some people have said, Ms. Mitchell, people in Ward 3, as a regional councillor, you can relate to this, people in Ward 3 look at themselves as the Cambridge of Waterloo. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, but it's true. Pastor Levesque, you made a very interesting comment on the economic impact and how that money can be returned to Waterloo. And I would like to make a motion to have staff investigate and report back on the economic, equity, and inclusion impact of the All Saints grant request.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Are you seconding the motion?
With a comment, if I could.
Councillor Henry seconding the motion.
Thank you. I would like to second the motion and request, if I could, a modification to it, to just add programming also. We have heard quite a bit about different programming in the update with Albert McCormick and what that might happen, but I think it would be good for us to have that full overview of the impact. Thank you.
Councillor Bassett. Pardon me?
Yeah, discussion.
Is it time for debate discussion?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible to also, if we were to move ahead with this, to two questions. I don't know how I'm going to vote today, guys. More information is usually a very good thing, but I do have some striking concerns that maybe would be better placed for after I got a report with some more detailed information. So I'm not closed to the opportunity of getting more information, but I have some major hesitations. So if it were to go forward, though, is it too much of an ask for city staff to also kind of review that community versus centralized model and what opportunities we might be able to look at to expand for all the good reasons that you've mentioned, 15-minute communities, making sure that there's not a class-based system. And one of my hesitations is about having a class-based system addressed by a religious institution, and one that you've namely noted it has deeply colonial roots. And so that's a major concern of mine, and I would much rather see a public institution deliver community program across the city. And that's not to say you're not doing good programming for your congregation and that I don't appreciate your support. It's just sort of my worldview. So that's one request. I also happen to have a academic connection to someone who does extensive research on faith-based social service organizations, and so I would wonder if I could connect staff with that person to just get a better understanding of the academic research behind it. This person has also offered they'd be willing to potentially look at some partnering opportunities to do some research. And I didn't ask him, but I don't think he's watching, but I'll send it to him. And I think it would be part of his job, not like to pay him. So those would be my two requests if this does move forward.
Yeah. If council directs us to do that, we would welcome that opportunity, yes.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just want to know a little bit more about the relationship that the community association may have with the local schools. Like I know in Ward 7 we use Mary Allen uses the Elizabeth Siegler resources. And I'm just curious about what that relationship is like right now, and maybe what the potential for that collaboration with the two school boards might be in terms of community assets, whether it's the playgrounds to the gyms or potentially meeting space.
Is that a question?
Is that direction in the report you want, or is it a question for now?
It's a question for now.
Okay,
Just wondering where we are with collaborations with the local school boards in terms of community assets.
So through you, Chair Freeman, our neighborhood associations utilize a number of different spaces. We even use nursing homes, retirement homes. We use some schools as well for their meetings. We even use our fire hall. So each neighborhood association has a relationship of a space that they might be using on a regular basis for their meetings. Every year, they would rebook that space with whoever it is. To get more about the school boards, we meet with the school boards on a regular basis to determine how we can program using the schools, gymnasiums for basketball groups, soccer fields for some of the youth that are playing soccer. So we do have those conversations with the school board on a regular basis to see how we can nurture and advance the neighborhood itself in terms of our relationship with the neighborhood and the school. Does that help? Thank you.
Can I look Councillor Rowe and then Councillor Bodley?
Through you, Chair. I just wanted to add onto the motion, just the inclusion, the discussion with Sanjay about looking at the different equity deserving groups and how that can be part of this.
Councillor, sorry. Oh, yeah, Mr. Dykstra, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through council, just a comment on the community versus centralized model and the consideration of direction in that, on a motion to that. That has been a point of conversation with the team as we embark on some recreation master planning work, and that's within the budget for 2024. So it's a bigger question that we have had in the past, that the current rec master plan had spoken to, and we're in that current state right now. So I just share with council that that's a bigger conversation, and many aspects of that proper consultation. So I just want to share that point of reference for council in terms of including something so broad in a request that we're dealing with today. I even see the time frame to report back being now into the fall with the scope that we're looking at as well, just trying to hit the mark on these points.
Thank you. Councillor Bodley.
I too am like Councillor Vasic. I'm struggling with the faith-based element of this. I'm struggling a lot with the precedent-setting piece of this. One of the things that I'm not really struggling with is the support for these organizations that that Pastor Levesque has spoken to. I mean, I don't know, truthfully, all of these organizations. I don't think I've ever heard of Afro, but Lutherwood, Camino, Adventure for Change in particular, House of Friendship, the Food Bank, etc. Could I get like a generalized comment from staff about how we are supporting those organizations today? And then I'm going to kind of layer this into my thoughts, I guess, as I think them out loud. If those organizations were to collectively come in front of us today asking for $120,000 to spend wherever they wanted to spend it, perhaps at the church, but perhaps anywhere, would we give them that money? Do we have that money? Are they asking for that money?
Won't speak at all. As far as the grants are concerned, Horizon, now known as Camino, they receive a foundational grant from the City of Waterloo. The House of Friendship receives a foundational grant, and a number of other organizations will come to the city for a grant through the grant process. So that it varies in amounts, and it varies in terms of what they're asking for. Some are for projects that they wish to do, along with the various neighborhood grants, the matching funds, the neighborhood grants that are received annually by the respective groups. Adventure for Change, we have a working relationship with them. We have just provided them with some dollars to help us with some project deliverance. And so we work very closely with them as well. And we're in conversations with them currently about how they can utilize space at Alt McCormick.
And just as a follow-up to that, and sorry that it was verbal sewage there for a bit, but are they asking us for more money? Do they need more money? I'm sure with any not-for-profit, they're always asking for more money. But is this a particularly acute concern with any of these organizations that have been listed that Pastor Levesque had referenced that they are that the church is partnering with?
Some of the organizations have come during budget time to say, could they get an increase in their foundational grant? And we listened to their commentary, and then I believe it was last granting, we council approved some additional money that went to some of these groups. So we try and listen to them. They're not coming and asking for a specific increased amount. They might say, could we receive, let's say, maybe $10,000 more on our foundational grant? And then we balance the request based on what they're doing for our community. But I must state that we try to stay away from the social programs, as noted by earlier, that we provide for recreation-based or activity-based foundational funding, as opposed to getting into some of the food vouchers and that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Yep, Councillor Vassic, go ahead.
Just a clarifying question for Commissioner Dykstra. Were you saying that the Recreation Master Services Plan you anticipate coming back in the fall, or this a report for this particular question?
Through the chair to the councillor for clarity would be this report with the associated recommendations based on the direction. The Rec Master Plan would be an initiative starting in 2024.
What quarter in 2024?
Well, I would hope shortly after the budget approval, and then we can go from there.
Yep, go ahead, Jim.
Just for like just for the point of interest for tonight, we can certainly do a detailed review of what you've requested for this particular request. But the request beyond, could we look at a model that differs from our current model, that would be done could be considered during the master planning process that Mark was referring to. Does that help a bit more?
Yes. Baby steps. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Council. So the clerk has sent me a message. I want to make sure that we get the motion on the screen so that we know what people are talking about. So it would be that council directs staff to
investigate and report back on the economic, equity, and inclusion impact of the All Saints grant request.
I thought that
And
Councillor
programming.
Hanmer had some other piece. Does that cover what you're thinking?
No, if you, thank you, through you, Chair. If you could just add economic, equity, inclusion, and programming considerations. It's there. Just through you, Chair, I believe, Mayor, it's more than just the economic development, it's the economic impact, unless you're thinking that it's broad enough.
No, I thought that's what Councillor Roach had said, so it's up to him.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Hanmer. It's the economic impact. Sorry if I confused you.
Okay. I think it's associated with the request, right? Associated with the request from All Saints Anglican Church. Okay. Yes, Councillor Vassic.
I'm sorry. I have an elephant in the room question that I have to ask you before I make this decision. I can't make it. I don't want to wait until September to ask this question because it's the question that will determine how I decide tonight. My understanding is that the Church of England has approved same-sex blessings. So a same-sex couple can get married, have a civil union, and then can get blessed by the Anglican Church. So, but you can't get married under the Church of England. So you do that differently here? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Church of England, we are in relationship with, but we are our own province with our own canons and our own identity. So the Anglican Church of Canada is in relationship. They do not set our doctrine. We do that ourselves. In the Diocese of Huron, in which I am a member of which All Saints is a member of, we do marry same-sex couples. And it is something that our bishop is very committed to, and it's something that we practice at All Saints as well.
So thank you, that is helpful. What is the relationship then with, I don't know how all the relationships work, so are you a part of the Church of England? And
the best way to think about the Anglican Church worldwide is to think about the Commonwealth. Does Canada and the government of Canada, is it dictated by the Crown? Can the Crown tell the Canadian Parliament what to do? No. The Anglican Church is in very much the same type of relationship. So the Anglican Church of Canada, which does perform same-sex marriages. Same with the Episcopal Church in the United States performs same-sex marriages. Some of the Anglican churches in the global south do not. But we're all just in this sort of relationship of like common heritage, like the Commonwealth itself. What the C of E says and doesn't affect us. We make our own decisions. Just as Canada makes its own decisions and the Crown doesn't decide for Canada.
okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question to staff, and I don't know who wants to answer this, whether it's Mr. Anderson or Mr. Dykstra. That motion that's on the table, how much staff time are we asking to be committed to this? And what won't they get done while they're doing this?
Maybe I'll start this one. And I think through you, Chair Freeman, Commissioner Dykstra had noted we'd report back in the fall. We do see a little bit of work required, as we heard Sanjay respond, doing a little bit of outreach with the equity groups within the community to kind of garner some deeper feedback to help council with this decision. And it's not an easy decision. The delegation noted the administration's conversations with us and the points that we had raised before. And council's kind of going through the same process that staff did. And we understand that. But we want to give you a meaningful report, and that's why we wanted the fall timeline. In total hours, it's not an easy undertaking. This is probably going to be several weeks of staff time. It would be my anticipation.
And do we know whether other similar requests have been made by the church to the region?
Maybe I'll defer that one to Jim. I believe yes in this case.
Yes, it's my understanding, through you, Councillor Freeman, it's my understanding that the All Saints Church presented a motion to Regional Council in early December of this year, and a report came back in early February, I believe. I may have the dates a bit off, of this year, of which Regional Council decided not to fund.
Thank you for that information. That's very helpful. Okay, Council, I think we have a motion on the table. And
May I ask a question? Can you repeat that, Mr. Bowman? With regard, you said that it was the region's point? You're saying that it was denied?
It was my understanding that Regional Council received a delegation in early December of 2022, and in February or thereabouts in 2023, it was referred back to staff to review it. They came back, and when the decision was not to provide funding.
Pastor Marty, can you confirm that, please?
sorry, I'm running the meeting.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Through the chair, may I ask Pastor Marty to confirm Mr. Bowman's statement?
yes.
That is partially true. For the grant, we did ask Regional Council for a direct grant like this. Regional Council decided no, not to do that because they do have funding mechanism in place, and we have applied to the upstream fund, and that's where they directed us to go to.
Thank you for that. Okay. So there's a funding route with the region that is going to be considered by the region. Okay. So there is a motion on the table, and all in favor? Okay, and those contrary minded? So that's a split vote. That vote falls. I'll just say thank you to the delegation for coming with us today, and I'm sorry, we're going to be moving on to our next agenda item. Okay, so we are now looking at our public meetings. I want to just do a health break check. It's 20 to 8. Does anyone need a moment, or can we just move ahead and move to the informal meeting? Just go? Okay, let's do that. So this is an informal public meeting to consider item 12B, zoning bylaw amendment Z 2301. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing these proposed amendments for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to these amendments. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position, and a staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs the registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this item, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of the council chambers. If there is more than one registry, please make sure that you are signing the appropriate one. The planner, Tristan Devro, will now provide a brief overview of the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Chair Freeman, Mayor, members of council. So this presentation is for a general amendment to the zoning bylaw that administration is putting forward. So this is not tied to any specific property. This is citywide, nor is it tied to any particular development or initiative beyond just doing general upkeep amendments to the zoning bylaw. The reference application number is Z2301. Just a bit of background. So the current zoning bylaw 2018-050 was adopted by council in September of 2018. Periodically, staff will bring general amendments to council for their consideration to update the bylaw, to resolve any issues or lack of efficiencies that we find as we work with the bylaw, and just generally keep the bylaw up to date and relevant. This is the fourth general amendment that administration has brought for council's consideration. The last one being in June of last year.
Tristan, can I just trouble you to raise the podium a wee bit?
Sure.
So that you're a little bit more in line with the microphone. It'll help with people listening online, and it will help me because I don't hear very well. Thank
Apologies for that. That's about as far as that'll go, so I will slouch a bit for the remainder. So for this round of general amendments, the main purpose, the bulk of the amendments that we're looking at are related to recent changes in provincial legislation, specifically Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster, as well partially Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone. So there's a couple items related to those. And since we're taking general amendments anyway, we were looking for opportunities if there's any other updates and corrections or clarity items to bring forward at the same time. So specifically what we're looking at this time is, again, related to Bill 23, provincial changes recently came into effect that municipalities cannot have any bylaw or regulation that prohibits or prevents a property that is residentially zoned from developing up to 3 dwelling units on that property, additional dwelling units within a house or a coach house. Those regulations are allowed by right by the province. Currently, our zoning bylaw does not reflect that. It limits, in many cases, you can have what we are calling a second residential unit or a coach house. You can't have both, and you can't have more than one within a dwelling, within a principal building. So we're looking at cleaning up those amendments. Again, this is already permitted by the province currently, so this is really just updating the language of our bylaw to reflect what is permitted by the province, just to improve clarity for property owners and developers as they're looking at the bylaw to make sure that our regulations match what's permitted. We're a bit more cleanup. We currently call suites within an existing building a second residential unit. We'll change the name to additional residential unit to reflect the fact that there may be more than one. Coach houses, another example where while they're permitted in many zones throughout the city, there's some specific geographical limits on where they can go. Basically anywhere that does not have lane access, according to the bylaw, does not have the rights to build a coach house. Again, with the provincial changes, that's no longer enforceable. So we were looking at just clearing up some of those regulations. Moving on to the next point, another thing we're looking at is with developments within the Northdale neighborhood. As you're probably aware, there is a holding provision that's placed on development there, and development cannot occur until that holding provision is removed. One of the conditions of removing that holding provision is that site plan endorsement occur. We've been finding that there can sometimes be a bit of a process loop that can come into effect where site plan approval, for site plan submissions of site plan approval, zoning has to be in place. For zoning to be in place, the holding has to be lifted, which means site plan approval has to happen, and it can cause a bit of a logic loop. In addition, with Bill 109 setting out some very strict time considerations for site plan approvals, we're looking at removing the requirement for endorsement as part of the lifting of the holding symbol. Not to say that the holding will be, those regulations will still be there, and the eventual site plan application will still be compared to the provisions within that holding, and the Northdale plan and the urban design guidelines associated therein, but just kind of breaking that connection a bit to get to clear up that loop. Additional things we're looking at, we're reviewing a lot of our definitions to make sure that they're clear. The one I've highlighted here, landscape open space, we've had a lot of discussions with the development community recently where there's there's a lack of clarity as to exactly what we include and what we don't. So we just wanted to make sure that we can tighten up that definition a little bit, as well as any other definitions while we're kind of reviewing to see if there's anything else that needs to be tightened up. I already mentioned that the second residential unit definition will be amended to reflect the additional residential units. And then just any other miscellaneous errors that we keep a tally, we keep a running list of just issues that we encounter as we work with the bylaw on a day-to-day basis. So there'll be a number of smaller items that'll mostly related to missing regulations and items like that. As we finish our review, if there's any other items, they might get added to this round of general amendments, or depending on the complexity or the priority, might get added to a future round of general amendments. So next step, we're finalizing kind of the drafts of the changes that we're proposing, and those are going to be circulated shortly to internal departments as well as our external review and commenting agencies for feedback. Once we get that feedback, we'll incorporate any changes necessary and then provide the updated draft for council's consideration as part of a formal public meeting at a future date. And I will be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Council questions, Councilor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Tristan. I just wanted to clarify for the holding symbol for Northdale, that will remove the need to come to council to request that. Is that correct?
That's not the change we're proposing. The holding removal process will still remain. The only element that we're looking at as far as this process is concerned is the requirement for site plan approval to happen before the holding can be removed.
Right, okay.
So
Got it.
just
Okay.
to kind of break
Yep.
that process a little bit.
Good. Thank
so
you.
in the full process, site plan would happen afterwards.
Yep, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you. Through you, my question has been answered. Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe.
I had a question. Can you help me to understand well, first off, on the draft amendments, are you planning to do them red line or something to that effect so it's very easy to see what's changing?
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. Yes, the final report will, in addition to the actual bylaw for the changes, there will be a redlined version that's showing exactly the wording that's being changed. Anything that's being removed or added will be highlighted once we finalize the drafts.
And do you already know who the external review agencies are that you plan to go out to get feedback on the changes?
Yes, Chair Freeman, we have a standard list of review agencies for all zoning amendments, so it'll include the region, but as well as GRCA and a number of other usual suspects.
So you know what? When I read that, I actually thought, and I don't know whether we can do this, but recognizing that a lot of the changes directly relate to land development and increased units and that kind of thing, whether it makes sense to ask for the home builders insight on it, even though they're not on our standard circulation list for zoning bylaw amendments. That was the only thing I was wondering about, is that the home builders, and I don't know whether or not the region still has, I'm looking at Mr. Cotter, I'm sorry, maybe you can help, or Mr. Ormson. The region used to have a regeneration, community planning committee. I was on it for a while. I don't know whether that's entirely disbanded or not, and whether there might be some insight from that.
Through your Chair Freeman, the group's been disbanded, but certainly we do contact the region, reaching out to the Home Builders Association. We have a liaison that we regularly work with, so we can certainly do that. Some of the amendments that are being advanced are being driven by conversations that we are having actively with the development industry, the architects. So certainly they will be engaged in the process as well, independently. Anyone that wishes to engage certainly is welcome to provide comments.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. That was where my mind was going, and of course for a ZBA, there's always a regular external circulation list. I was thinking beyond that, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair Freeman, and through you to Tristan. Thanks for this. Just wondering, when you're talking about definitions, and I don't think you're including it in this, but I'm curious about with Bill 23, and there's some lack of clarity around various aspects of Bill 23, I understand, but I'm concerned about our definition, like the city's definition of affordable housing lining up with the province's definition of affordable housing, and if that is something that like that will have to be addressed at some point, but if you see that as something coming soon, or where that would fit into what you're doing here.
Through your Chair Freeman to Mayor McCabe, that will be a little bit beyond the scope of these general amendments. Really the intent of these amendments is to get our bylaw in line with what is allowed by the province as far as the amount of units and stuff like that, as well as some issues that we've come across. As far as looking at affordable housing, attainable housing, that is certainly something that the department in general is looking at through other review mechanisms. I know within our growth management team, work is being done on inclusionary zoning and items like that, where they're looking a little bit more carefully as to what those, how the province is looking at that. And there's a certain amount of when thinking about affordability provision, the region is heavily involved as well. So those are certainly conversations that administration will have going forward with the region as we kind of work to go through all the legislative changes. But but yeah, as part of this particular application or this round of amendments, it is really more intended to just clean up our zoning bylaw and make sure that the uses that are permitted reflect what is allowed by the province.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. I know you have a lot on your plate in lots of departments, but particularly in the planning department, given all the changes. But I just think that's a really important one that we're going to have to. I mean, if anyone from the province is listening, we are looking for clarification on that point and a number of other points from this bill, and likely Bill 109 as well. So, thank you.
Any other questions for staff, council? Okay, seeing none. Is there any registered delegations that would like to speak on these general amendments? There's nothing registered, so I will say, is there anyone present who would like to speak about these changes? And seeing none, since there's no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded, and staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. So thank you very much, Mr. Devereaux and the planning team. With that, we're moving on to item 15, consideration of notice given at a previous meeting. There is none. Notice of motion, council. Seeing none. Communications and correspondence. I don't think there was any in this package. Unfinished business, council. Okay, questions? No? Okay, and new business, council. Yep, Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. This is actually Waterloo Region business, not specific to City of Waterloo, but I just wanted to share that on June 4th, Community Coalition on Refugee and Immigrant Concerns will be hosting with our community partners World Refugee Day Waterloo Region. And World Refugee Day is celebrated globally on June 20th, but with our community partners, we celebrate and recognize the experiences of refugees throughout the month of June. So at the museum, on June 4th from 1 to 3 p.m. The community partners will be coming together to host a launch for the month. And there will be the World Refugee Day Awards of Distinction. The museum will have 3 art installations with refugee themes. And the most exciting thing for me is to share that we're going to have a first of its kind Rohingya community presentation. So here in Waterloo Region, we have the largest Rohingya community, in Canada. I'm very excited about this, in Canada. And in talking with the community center, they have really shared that, as we know, the Rohingya have been incredibly persecuted. And they have silenced their voices, they've silenced their culture, they don't wear their traditional clothing, they don't speak their language. And this is the first opportunity for them nationally in Canada, if not the world, to celebrate their culture. So they're going to share their language, their songs, their clothing. So it's really exciting. And I really hope that everyone will consider coming and supporting the community. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Any other new business, council? Right. Seeing none, enactment of bylaws. Do I have a mover for the enactment of bylaws? Moved by Mayor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Vasek. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Roach. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. It has been an incredibly long day, and I wanted to say that it's been a very enjoyable one to spend with all of you. So thank you for your time.